So STEM 21 will continue on from STEM 20, where we looked at in STEM 20 the first two areas of types of training and training methods. STEM 21 we're going to look at for the second part of how does training affect performance under types of training and training methods. As the arrows indicate here, we'll be looking at flexibility, static, ballistic, P&F, dynamic, and also strength training. Have a little bit some of the examples on the free and fixed weights, some elastics and hydraulic. So that's what we're going to be looking at in STEM 21. First area that we've got here is flexibility training. And as we can see, what it states here is that it's the ability of the joint to bend, stretch, twist through a range of motion without injury. So the better the flexibility of the muscle around near the joint, then the less chance of injury that's going to occur. When a muscle is stretched, the receptors that are within the muscle, known as the muscle spindles, they're stimulated. Some reasons why flexibility is very important. For most sporting people, obviously the number one benefit of flexibility is it prevents injuries from occurring and muscle soreness. It improves the mechanical efficiency of the body. It increases the ability of the muscles to stretch, improves coordination amongst the muscles, improves the relaxation of muscles, reduces the tightening of muscles after performance, and counteracting the restricting effects of muscle growth resulting from resistance training. So there's some of the advantages of reasons why flexibility is important. And of course, we wouldn't expect you to know all those 7, but having an idea of 2 or 3 of them would be very beneficial of some of the important parts of flexibility training. When we talk about flexibility training, we know there are 4 different types of stretching. We can see it on the screen here. We have static, we have dynamic, we have proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, otherwise known as P&F, and we have ballistic. And we're going to go through each of these 4 areas now and have a look at how they operate. I've just put this little screen together here for you, or this little slide, just to give you an idea of how to help you with your memory of looking at the different types of stretching. If we think of static stretching, S for static is S for still. We think about ballistic, the B from ballistic is B for bouncing. If we think about P&F, the P for P&F relates to partner stretching. And finally, dynamic. We think about dynamic, that's just straight out the new way to stretch. It's been the latest craze of the way people should be trying to stretch these days. And we're going to have a look at each of those 4 areas now in a little bit more detail. But they're the ways to help you remember your types of stretching. The first area we're going to look at here is going to be the static stretching. Static stretching is also called passive, or as we looked on the previous screen, we could have said still stretching. It's when the athlete's sitting down nice and still. It involves the gradual lengthening of the muscle to a point where it's held for 10 to 30 seconds. So there's no movement at all, hence static. Static stretching is a very safe and effective method of stretching the actual muscles. Here we have a picture of a young lady doing a hamstring stretch. This is an example of a static stretch. She's sitting down nice and still. There is no movement. She's just stretching the hamstring. That will be an example of a static stretch. The next one we come to is dynamic stretching. Dynamic stretching is also called active or range of motion stretching, ROM. It stretches muscle groups that cross over joints, so more than one muscle might be stretched at once, as compared to static stretching, where only one muscle stretch at a time. Dynamic stretching involves the gentle repetition of types of movements that will be experienced in a performance. So again, it's very specific. An example of this type of stretching is a full lunge, where the back knee touches the ground before the next leg is moved forward. And we're going to have a look at that in a minute. So that's dynamic stretching. So here's some examples of dynamic stretching. Okay, so you can see here on the screen the person who's actually the gentleman that's doing the stretching. He's doing some lunges here, as we spoke about in our examples. This helps us to see that we're actually stretching on the move here. We're not standing still, we're moving. It's in a controlled area. And there's a number of different varieties there, different types of stretching that he's doing. We saw the lunge one. Here's the one walking on his toes. Help to stretch out the calves and the legs. Walking on the heel. So these are all different variations of dynamic stretching. The next area that we're going to look at is going to be ballistic stretching. And we start to think about ballistic. Again, we go back to that screen we saw before, where we know that ballistic is, the B for ballistic relates to the actual bouncing stretch. This was very, very popular a number of years ago, 1950s, it says here, 1960s. But due to the ability of it to cause injuries, it's nowhere near as popular now, and it's not used very often. because of the damage it can actually cause to the muscles because of the bouncing effect. Because of the force of the stretch reflex comes into play and places a lot of pressure on the muscle or the muscle fibre, which can then obviously lead to it actually tearing the muscle off because it hasn't been warmed up properly. An example would be toe touches to stretch the hamstring by bouncing down and touching the toes with your hands. And we'll see a video of this in a minute to give you an example of ballistic stretching, but it's an upward movement, moving up and down, bouncing to try and stretch. However, ballistic stretching can be very useful in some performances where ballistic and explosive actions are required. But this would only be performed by skilled athletes or people that are seasoned athletes that have been competing or participating in sport for a period of time, and their muscles are able to do this. You wouldn't do this with a junior group of year 7 PE class, for example, because they're just not in the stage where they'd be able to physically handle it, and you'd probably have a number of injuries occurring. That's why ballistic stretching is not as common. So we just watched this video here. As you can see, the girl, she's bouncing down to her toes, puts a lot of emphasis on the hamstring here, with more chance of there being injury, especially if they haven't warmed up properly. So if you did this to a junior PE class, it would increase the chances of an injury or a muscle tear occurring, which is something you want to avoid, which is why it's nowhere near as effective as it used to be. Third area is proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, P and F stretching. And then we spoke about before, talking about the P for the P and F relates to a partner stretch. So it's a combination of technique, a combined technique of static stretching and isometric stretching. Isometric is where the muscle is activated, but there's no change in its length. So what happens is here, a muscle group is statically stretched, so still, and then it contracts, so you push against the object where you're not moving, but the muscle's actually activated, and then you go back to another static stretch again, and you find that the leg can move a little bit further. We've just got written at the bottom here that P and F stretching obviously uses the partner, so it's a way of remembering that it's a partner stretch with an isometric contraction and a static stretch, which helps to increase the stretchability of the muscle. We'll have a look here at an example.
We're looking at stretching the hamstrings with the hold, relax, and contract, relax techniques. From one, you can stretch one side. Make sure his knee stays straight so you can get a proper stretch. However, this is bad body mechanics for me. So, to prevent myself from getting injured, I'm going to hop on the table. Press his leg against my shoulder for the hold, relax. I'm going to use also my left hand or thigh, depending on which is more comfortable, to stabilize his right hip. He's going to push against my shoulder for 10 seconds. This is once again an isometric stretch. After 10 seconds to relax. And I'll stretch it for 10 more seconds. Repeat this again. This is once again the hold relax technique. We'll be pushing against me for 10 seconds, isometric. And then another stretch for 10 seconds. We'll do this about 3 or 4 times. To show the contract relax, what he's going to do is he's going to contract against me, this is isotonic, in line with the range of motion. And relax. Okay. Push against me. About 10 seconds, relax. And breathe through. And each time the stretch should be deeper and deeper every time. Do this 3 to 4 times. Contract 10 seconds, relax 10 seconds. And repeat on the other side.
So there are 4 different types of flexibility: static, ballistic, dynamic, and P and F stretching. We then move on to strength training. When we talk about strength, we're talking about the ability of the muscle to exert a force. Okay, so the greatest force that a muscle can exert in a single effort is known as the absolute strength of an individual or of the muscle. To develop strength, resistance must be applied to the muscles as they contract. And this is what we sometimes we call, or we know as, if you might have heard it in different terminology, resistance training. This resistance can take the form of, and we've got a list of them there. There's person's own body weights if you're doing push-ups, barbells or dumbbells, so bicep curls, weight machine systems like a lat pull-down, hydronic resistance machines like a leg extension, elastic bands, some rehab exercises for the shoulder, so water, whether you're swimming, pulleys or levers, like a cable crossover. They're different examples there of some strength training resistance that can take form. Down the bottom here, I've just got some of the terminology that is used, just to give us an understanding of what people are talking about. When we're talking about repetitions or reps, we're talking about the number of times an exercise is repeated without rest. When we talk about sets, the number of groups of repetitions of a particular exercise. Resistance is the amount of weight used as a load. Repetition max is the maximum number of repetitions that can be completed. And rest is the time necessary for the muscle to recover after periods of overload. So for example, Mr. Sullivan's doing 6 sets of the bench press at 6 sets of 8 reps on the bench press at 60 kilos with a minute in between. So the repetitions he's doing, 6 sets of 8 reps, he's doing 8 reps. The sets, he's doing 3 sets. Sorry, I said 6, he's doing 6 sets of 8 reps. The resistance is the amount he's lifting, which is what, 60 kilos I think I said. The repetition maximum would be the maximum amount of times that Sir can lift that weight. And the rest, if we said he's having a minute or 2 minutes off in between, that would be his rest. First one we're going to look at here as an example would be weight machines. So the weight machines, they enable correct positioning and proper movement, so they give people better technique. So when people first start out in weight training, they use a lot of these machines because of the ability to make sure they have the correct technique, because it's on a guided system and it can keep people correct in the movement they're actually doing and reduce the chance of an injury occurring. If you look at it here, the machines are hydraulic and they're excellent for isolating specific muscles. As I said before, the guided action and variable resistance makes it very popular for people, in particular with rehab, so rebuilding after an injury, because they are much safer than free weights because of the guided path of the actual machine itself. The weight in the machine will only move, as you can see here by this picture, until the girl pulls down on the bar for a lat pull down. However, the only downside of these things is that the machines are very, very expensive and they take up a lot of space in a gym. And we have a number of these in our gym up in the Morley Centre. Free or fixed weights, an example of this would be dumbbells. They enable correct positioning and proper movement while an athlete is lifting. Sorry, I'll say that again. The dumbbells, they can appear as either fixed or free weights. So whether it be a dumbbell or a barbell, they're a free weight. They're not on a set guided path. They're going to be controlled by the person actually doing it. And as I said here, some of the weights can be on a dumbbell can be fixed at a set weight, or some you might be able to adjust them to make them a bit heavier or lighter based on the ability of the person. They allow for a greater range of motion than machines do because they're not on a guided track. So if somebody's doing like a dumbbell lateral raise, lifting the dumbbells out to the side and up, that person can control the movement or allow greater movement than the machine would because they're doing it with their own body. Using free or fixed weights also encourages better joint strength and a closer transfer of training to a given activity. So you can be more specific. So in the rugby league, we do a number of free weight exercises that would be very specific to the movements that the boys would be doing in rugby league. So that's the free or fixed weights. And you can see there by the picture that the girl's holding the dumbbell. The third area is the elastic bands. And this is something that's come into play over the last couple of years of a little bit more importance. Okay, these are very cheap and they're an alternative to weights. So again, they provide a resistance, but they're a little bit of variety for people. They come in different levels of strength or different levels of tension is probably a better term, and that's normally based on the colour. So different colours represent more tension, so to make the muscle work a little bit harder. And again, there would be a progression for an athlete using these. The main advantage of using elastic bands is that the athlete feels the resistance during the full exercise motion, so through the full range of movement they can actually feel the tension. I've got a couple of examples here that I can show you. This is the first one here. So we're doing some shoulder exercise to help build up the stability of the shoulder, in particular the acromion-clavicular joint, which would be the AC joint in his left shoulder. It's his left shoulder he's building it up just by the way he's doing this. So you've got the band there. And the second one here, this is going to be another one for the shoulder. Helps with the rotator cuff, the rotation of the shoulder joint, especially in rugby league where there's a lot of rotation of the shoulder. You can see that the band's attached on the wall here as he performs the movement. So they're the different types of elastic band activities that people can do. A few examples there for you. And that finishes off that part of the point.